AFMC is really known.
And also make sure
Hello and welcome into this week's edition of AFMC TV. Thank you for joining us. Today we are talking about the subject of stroke. And joining me, who knows a thing or two about this subject, is Dr. Beth Milligan. Hi, Dr. Milligan.
Hi.
So this is a subject near and dear to your heart.
It is.
So let's just start with the at a very basic level. What causes stroke?
We know that stroke is usually caused by one of two things. Either a vessel is going to get blocked and it starves the tissue of oxygen on the other side of that blockage, or you're going to have a rupture of a vessel. It'll burst and a rupture and it'll bleed out.
Okay. So is this something that can take place at any age?
It actually can. We've seen children have strokes, very young children. It tends to actually become more of a problem as you get in your 50s, where that pretty much doubles your chance of having a stroke.
What role does stress play in this, or do we know scientifically?
Well, stress can play a role in most any medical problems we have, and stress tends to make us not follow the guidelines we've been told to follow. We tend to not be as compliant because we're trying to deal with the stress at the time. So I think it probably plays a big role in strokes.
What are the differences? We hear terminology, TIAs or mini strokes or stroke. Can you discuss what kind of each one of those mean? What is a TIA?
Sure.
And how serious is that versus like a stroke? Because I think sometimes we think stroke is like the big kahuna, and that's...
That they're actually used interchangeably sometimes. However, pretty much mini strokes and TIAs are pretty much synonymous. Now,
okay.
A mini stroke is, first of all, talk about a TIA, transient ischemic attack. That means that vessel closes down for a shorter period of time, but some reason it'll open back up. So what causes it? It'll open back up. It's more temporary. It's kind of, you hear people say, well, I had a mini stroke, but I got better. A full-blown stroke is a full-blown cerebral vascular incident where it's much longer than any of the mini strokes you would have.
And much more serious.
Oh, yes.
Way more
Yes.
serious. Okay, well, you're speaking a little bit from experience here. Would you like to share a little bit of your story?
Well, I'm very passionate about it because at the age of 53 years old, I had a pretty intensive, full-blown, as you say, big kahuna stroke. I was just cooking dinner and noticed my face started getting numb. I couldn't make my tongue work, and I tried to tell my husband something was wrong. I was able to diagnose myself, which I think was very important. I had trained. I'm a physician. I had trained. So I knew that I needed to get help. So knowing the signs and symptoms, I think, was the most important thing for me. And the fact that I'm here sitting in front of you without deficit.
Yes.
And that's my story that I want to tell people, is how to recognize strokes and what to do if you have those signs and symptoms.
And what do you do, and how do you recognize? You had presence of mind.
Yeah. Well, okay, I'm going to really teach you a quick acronym that could save your life, and it's taught by the American Heart and American Stroke. It's called FAST. First of all, facial. If you're not sure, my face was numb, my tongue was numb, and I was reaching up and I couldn't figure out why I was numb. So if you're with someone, you can notice there's probably an asymmetry. The face is dropped on one side. Mine was. Just take a look at them. Number two, if you can yourself, I did myself, raise your arms up. If one of the arms drops down, you can do it to a friend. Say, put your arms up. They'll be like, usually one side will drop down. And then you want to be able to have them speak. I couldn't speak at all. And most of the people's speech is impaired at that point. And not everyone, but if their face is dropping and their arms are dropping, there's a speech issue. I did that on myself too. And then time. Time is the golden answer right here. I did know literally in seconds, realized I was having a stroke. I looked at the clock and remembered the time, because you have that golden window to get to the hospital. they say to call an ambulance and have an ambulance get you, and you can tell them on the phone, I believe I'm having a stroke. Because once you hit the emergency room, you go into what they call a code stroke. And every team member is involved, and they know what to do at that point. It literally is a well-oiled clock. Everyone knows what to do, and the action is started. At that point, you're able to perhaps change the outcome of what would happen. Michelle, 70-80% of the strokes are preventable. So if we know what to do to prevent them, that's important. But if we know what to do once we're having one, we can still decrease the devastating effects of what might happen if you can't get to the hospital on time.
So how do you prevent them?
Well, preventing them is from a lot of the topics you've done in the past, keeping your blood pressure under control. If you smoke, stop. If you're diabetic, get your diabetes under control. And if you're heavy, get outside and lose weight. Those are some of the biggest things you can do. And of course, stress, you've talked about numerous times. Try to control your stress, but those are the biggies.
Okay. So fast forward, no lingering effects.
For the most part, not. Sometimes I notice some little fine motor issues. I'm left-handed. It was on my left side, I noticed that a little bit, and I think my balance is not as good. But you know what? Those are the aging. It might be because I'm a little older. It could be, but for the most part, I haven't noticed any cognitive issues or physical issues that have slowed me down.
That's amazing. Does it always happen on the right side, on the left side, or could it happen on the right?
It can happen on either side. The different various strokes. Mine just happened to be up in the right part of my brain, and I'm left-hand dominant, and that was the side. I knew pretty much when I reached up and felt my face, and I tried to talk, that I was having a stroke. I didn't know why, but I knew I was having a stroke, and I'm very thankful that I was able to be cognitively intact enough to know and get help.
Yes, definitely. Well, and your experience, and you talking about your experience, no telling how many lives that has impacted and potentially saved because they've heard your story. So thank you for sharing it today.
Thank you for that.
And thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you back here next week for more AFMC TV.